Hey guys, welcome back, and I'm finally back working on the car today. I had a couple big mistakes I made with the car here, and in this video today we're going to get them fixed up. One of them is with the fuel system. There's an injector return line regulator that I totally forgot about. I misplaced it. I didn't even know what it was. If you took the car out and floored it, it would stall and run out of fuel. It was the weirdest thing, so you couldn't even do a burnout with it or nothing. We're going to get that fixed up, and then we're going to move up front to the onto the intake pipe that we made in an earlier video, and we're going to get the mass airflow sensor installed into that intake pipe and wire it in as well. So these two things are going to get the car running 100% and exactly how it should be. So let's get at it. Alright, so we get the box open here. I got these from BC Diesel. It's just a factory replacement injector return lines for an LML, a 2016 truck. Right here you can see the injector regulator, this piece right here. This is the part that I chopped out of my harness because I didn't realize I needed it. The injectors on the LML need a regulated return for them to work properly, otherwise they do not work, trust me on this. So I got the new lines in here. We're going to get them installed on the car. This here's the passenger side of the engine, and this is how the return line runs. It just runs along the head here. And if we go over to the driver's side, you can see the same thing. So they're not too bad to get to. It's actually pretty easy to work on this engine and the car. It's not crowded or nothing. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to have to remove a few things to get to them. And then we're going to get them popped off there. You just basically pull the injector line off, you use a pair of pliers to pop them straight up, and that unlocks them. And then they pop straight off and they're sealed by an O-ring. So I'm going to get them all pulled off here, we'll slide them out, and then we'll get the new injector return lines installed. With the passenger side done, we'll just get it out of the way, and then we'll be able to move back over to the driver's side. I'll get the tube off of the intake pipe here, and then we'll get the clamp loose, and we'll be able to lift this intake pipe up out of the way. And then we're going to get the intercooler piping disconnected, and get the hose off and tuck it up out of the way, so we have full access to the driver's side to get the injector lines off. Now before we install these new injector return lines onto the car, we have to remove this 9th injector. The 9th injector is for the emission system on the car. You can see it right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the line and section it out. We're going to trim off right here at that very last hose barb. We're going to have to cut it a little, pull the line off, and then we'll rejoin the line right back at that point, removing that 9th injector. Since the car is a swap, I'm not running any emissions equipment, so this is unneeded, and we might as well just get rid of it right now, and that's going to really clean things up too, keep things tidy under the hood. With the line cut, now we're just going to push it back together. You can see the hose barb right here on that last injector return where the clips onto the injector. We're going to lube that up with a little bit of ATF, and then we're going to be able to push that hose right onto that hose barb, and that's all you need to do. There's no clamps, no nothing here. It's just a press fit seal. So it's quite tough to do. You're going to be very careful. The lines are plastic, or the fittings are plastic. You don't want to break a fitting off, but just get it lined up here like this. Give it a good hard push, give it a little bit of a twist, work its way on there. Once you have it on all the way, you're done, or we'll be done, and we'll be able to install these onto the car. So installation is the opposite of removal. Just get everything routed how it needs to be there. Make sure it's not kinked, not rubbing against anything it shouldn't be. Get all the injector connectors slid onto the corresponding injectors, and then the locking tabs just push straight in and lock, and that holds them on and seals them up. For the center here where the two lines meet, I got to do something a little different because before I just had them teed together, whereas now I have this regulator to mount. I'm going to hang it probably just about around the thermostat area here. That's actually how it was from factory. I do not have my factory bracket. I think it actually was pretty tall and stuck up too far anyways. So what I'm going to do is kind of hang it behind the thermostat here. You can see at the back of the thermostat housing there's actually a little pedestal sticking up that has threads in it. Perfect place to put a clamp to hold this regulator. It'll kind of hang it there, and then the other hose we can route over to that fuel rail log that we made in the previous fuel system video. It's still going to use that fuel log. I only had one input from the return lines anyways, so this all kind of works with that, and none of that time or effort is wasted on there. So once I get this thing kind of routed in place here and in a comfortable spot, we'll get that all plugged in, and then we can crank it up and see how it runs. And yeah, that definitely took care of that problem. Okay, so the second thing we're going to fix in this video is adding in the mass airflow sensor. When I originally built the intake piping from the filter to the turbo, I didn't put a mass airflow sensor in there. Something I want to add now, and I should have did in the first place. So here you can see I'm just measuring out how much longer we can extend the pipe, and in this case it's 4 inches. So we're going to get that thing off there. We're going to take the filter off. We're going to add 4 inches into the 4-inch section of the pipe is where it expands at the filter, and that's where we're going to add the mass airflow sensor itself into. The pipe that I'm using for this is just standard exhaust tubing, 4 inches in diameter. I'm going to measure 4 inches here, and get it topped off, and then we'll line it up and weld it onto that previous intake pipe that we already made. I'll prep the two pieces by cleaning the paint off of the old intake tube and then cleaning the burrs left over from cutting the new part that we're going to be welding onto it. A few magnets work pretty good for lining up the two pieces of pipe together. Once we get them flush, take the MIG welder, do a couple spots all the way around. Usually I go in 3 places. And then we'll mock it up, make sure it's good, and then we can fully weld this together and then clean up the welds. Since I have the pipe back mounted under the hood here in the correct position and I know the filter fits, I'll take this time to mock up the pad that's actually going to mount the sensor itself. Make sure we have a proper position for it here, and I'll go ahead and mark where we're going to locate it. That way when we take it back off, we can tack it in place and also drill a hole for the sensor to go through. And with the position of the hole marked on the new pipe, I can just use a regular old cup saw to drill through. I'll then screw the mass airflow sensor onto the mounting plate. That way we can set it into the pipe, get it positioned correctly, and make sure it's facing the right direction. I use a little bit of painter's tape just to protect the sensor while I'm moving it around here and make sure I don't damage the elements inside. They're very fragile. So you can see the sensor roughly marked up there, kind of holds itself in place. Make sure you have it facing the right way, it does matter. Then we'll go ahead and throw a few tack welds on it. But before we weld it too much, we'll have a look and make sure it's still running straight up and down inside the pipe, and then we can finish welding it after we remove the sensor. Then we'll fully weld it up, get it cleaned up, and it'll be ready for paint. With that done, we can now take care of the wiring side of things. When I originally did my wiring harness, I left the 5 wires for the mass airflow sensor just tucked up out of the way, and I made sure I left lots of extra loom so that when I added this back in, I'd have enough to cover it up and still all look as one piece. So I went ahead and slid all the heat shrinks onto that connector first. Then I want to take the wires and twist them together. I'm going to do it old school and still use a soldering gun and some solder, and then heat shrinking it after. So with the 2 wires twisted together, make sure you twist them together nice and tight. You don't want any extra frays of wire sticking out, because once the solder goes in there, it's going to be pretty hard and they could break through or poke through the heat shrink when you shrink it down. So you want to make sure that's nice and tight, and one of the key things when you're soldering is to make sure you don't get it too hot and make the wires brittle. So just go ahead and melt a little bit of solder on the end of the soldering gun. Then you want to warm up the bottom of the wire and keep your solder close and keep dabbing it until that solder starts to melt. Once it hits that melting point, you can feed it into the wire. You'll see it dissipate into the wire, and that'll create that good bond with all the wires and a great connection. Alright, with the soldering done, we can now take each one of our heat shrinks and we'll just slide them up the wires over top of the bare parts of the wires that we heat shrunk. And you'll notice here that I'm only sliding some part ways up. That's because I staggered my solder points. It's always good to stagger your solder points so you don't end up with like 5 solder joints all in one clump. It makes the wiring harness bigger in that area, which looks ugly, and also it could be like a stiff area for wires to bend and maybe break, or it's just a really good idea to get into practice of staggering them and keeping them laid out, and then when you put that loom on at the end, it's going to keep everything tight and nice and good looking. And with the extra loom trimmed off here, what I like to do is I'll start by doing a round of tape around the wires, and then go ahead and slip the split loom over. And then you want the tape to come through on the split. Then you can continue to wrap your tape around the end and then follow down the loom. This way it will connect your loom to the wires and keep it from sliding down or coming out of place in any way. I'll get my clamp set on the turbo there so we can reinstall the intake tube. But before we get too far here, we're going to take the test light and make sure we do have our ignition power on the corresponding pin on the mass airflow sensor plug-in. Hit turn the key on for that. So that confirmed, checked out good. I guess you could go ahead and check your grounds if you wanted to in there as well. Then we'll get the pipe set in place here, get it lined up on the V-band clamp on the turbo, get that tightened up, and then we can go ahead and install the tube that goes to the positive crankcase ventilation. To attach that hose, I'm actually just using a couple of zip ties. It's just a kind of a ventilation suction hose. It doesn't have any pressure in it, so a couple of zip ties tie it on just fine. Then we'll go ahead and get the filter slip back on. It just fits just perfect, really nice there. Just clears the front of the rad support. Get that tightened down, and then we can put our mass airflow sensor in place. Of course, make sure you install it the right way. Get the couple of screws in there. And then we'll finish off the installation by hooking up the connector, and then make sure you go ahead and double check the routing of the wire so it's away from the exhaust manifold, and we'll tie it up if we need to. Alright, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. I want to thank everyone for watching, and if you like the video, don't forget to hit that like button right down there. And if you want to see more videos like this on the Camaro, then hit that subscribe button. Trying to hit that 100,000 subscribers, so if you can help me out with that, that'd be great. I got a bunch of stuff lined up here with my square body build as well. You can see a couple videos are starting to get posted. Those are some older videos, and a bunch of new videos are going to be coming out. That one's going to be a Duramax as well, so that's going to be a really cool project. So stick around, stay tuned for that. And like I said, hit that subscribe button so you know when it comes out. Again, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.